So, hi, everybody. I'm very happy to have Sandra Murphy here with me today. We've only actually, our paths have only crossed relatively recently, thanks to Mark the bowler hat farmer. And so, without further ado, I mean, most people I think probably know me. I'm a holistic vet for those who don't. I specialise in raw feeding nutrition for cats and dogs and natural nutrition for our horses as well. And using sort of non-pharmaceutical and non-surgical treatments wherever possible. So that's me in a nutshell. But Sandra will now give us a lot more detail on her background and what she's going to talk to us about. And Sandra, over to you.
Oh, hi, Roger. Thank you so much for having me on. It was really funny because I met you first. Well, I didn't meet you, but I first saw you on Richard Vobes's
Okay.
podcast, and it was really good to see that there was another vet out there that was ethically minded, and it was really great that we actually linked up through Mark the Bowler Hat Farmer. So thank you, Mark,
Yes.
and yeah, thank you, Roger, for having me on.
Pleasure. So give us a little bit of background about you. Obviously, you've got a BSc ons on your screen there. So tell us a little bit about that, on what what you've done your science degree in, and what triggered you to do it, and then where have you taken that? Because I know you're doing something different to most other people who've gone down that route.
Yes, yes, Roger. Well, basically, I've been into horses since I can't remember, 3 years old. I remember riding the back of my mum's sofa when we used to have show jumping on the TV, and I used to show jump all the jumps with the riders, the David Brooms and all those old guys that that used to do the show jumping. And so it's been under my skin for a very long time, but when I was in the Royal Air Force, I was in the Royal Air Force for 12 years. But when I joined the Royal Air Force, I took my horse with me to RAF Cranwell. And there was this hunt, the thing that we used to go hunting. And I've never been before. And I thought, oh, well, I'll take him. So I jumped on him in the morning. I hacked him over to Sleaford, which was 7 miles along the A17, and got out there in the hunt field and just was up there chomping. He was chomping at the bit with the race, with the hounds and the masters, and was having a really good time going cross country, jumping jump. And then I realised about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, oh, actually, he hasn't had anything to drink, he hasn't had anything to eat.
Yeah.
And the huntsmen had changed their horses, and I didn't have a horse box to take mine home, and I thought I'd better get home. And so the lady said it's 12 miles that way. So I thought, oh my gosh, there's another 12 miles. I've got to take my horse home. So I did get home eventually. I got off him and walked him. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything all day. Got him back to the camp. And because I was on an RAF camp, I rushed to the naffy and I got them to liquidize a load of grass, to see if I could put it in a drink bottle. And then I phoned the vet. The vet came down and he couldn't get anything into him because his mouth was swollen. So he nasal gastric tubed him. Unfortunately, he burst all the blood vessels in his nose and it was blood everywhere. It was the most horrendous thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And there was nothing back then that could help my horse. Well, I kept that in my mind all the way through. And I actually went on to Dragon's Den in 2012 and I did Dragon's Den for a different product. And with that, I got a lot of background knowledge of what I needed to do. So what I needed to do was to be an expert in my field. And so that's why I went to university to study horses, because horses were the only thing I really knew.
Yeah.
And I did my BSc at Lincoln Uni, and I came up with this event. Obviously, with the hunting, came into my mind. I thought, what can I do to help? What could I have done to help my horse at the time? He survived, by the way. He didn't
Yeah.
die, but
Good. Well, that's yes.
yeah.
Put everybody's minds at rest there.
Oh, absolutely. No, it took me three weeks to recover, but he did survive.
Yeah.
But it was still haunting me all this time, and I thought, I'm doing a degree in equine. Let me see if I can do some research. So I researched alfalfa, and I thought, oh, this is a good base. We'll use that. And I tried to just mix it like a meal with water, and it just divided into solids and water. And as you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Indeed.
And one of those the reasons is because a horse is a prey animal. And because it's a prey animal, it has different physiological restrictions on it when it's in, parasympathetic and sympathetic modes. So when it's in the fight or flight mode, it doesn't normally take in fluids or anything like
No.
that. It wants to just get away as fast as it can. But a horse will always graze. So it will override that thirst mechanism by grazing. So you all know if you take a horse to a show and it's off its head, it's looking around, it'll always hand graze.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it may not drink anything. Now that's physiological, right? So I thought, okay, let's try and get this fiber to float. So what I was working on a human food bar at the time, and I found this ingredient that actually formed a gel at a molecular level that allowed the fiber to float in the water. So
Okay.
the whole bucket of water then became a feed.
So it became a suspension then.
It became a suspension of the fiber. So I just went, oh my, that was my eureka moment. I was in my pajamas and my slippers, and I jumped into my car, went down to the yard, woke my horses up at 3 o'clock in the morning, stuck this bucket of EquidGel, which it is now, which is what it's called,
Yeah.
under the horse's nose, and she just went, oh, thank you. And then I gave it to the next one, and they weren't thirsty. There was no thirst reason for them to drink. Granted, they weren't under stress, but there was no reason for them to drink, but they drank it because of palatability.
Sure.
So that's when it started.
Yeah.
So that's when the research started, and I started to research this feed, and this is where I've come up with today. I've the world's first liquid feed for horses. And Roger, you can lead a horse to water, and you can make it drink.
You can. You can. I mean, it's obviously so when you've got palatability there, it makes all the difference. And of
Yes.
course, one of my bugbears when with the more conventional horse feeds is the amount of molasses that's
Yeah.
being put into feeds. And what people don't realise actually is the size of a horse's stomach is roughly the size of a rugby ball, a little
Rugby
bit
ball,
bigger.
yeah.
It's not very big.
No.
And then you see these girls struggling with these great big bowls of food, which there's no way it's going to get properly digested in the stomach because there's too much of it there. And of course, the horses eat it because it's
Sweet.
been molassed, because it's
Sweet.
sweet. And of course, that's a great marketing ploy for the food manufacturers, because horses will overeat because they're addicted to the sugar. Sugar hits the same part of the brain as it does with us, and the carbohydrates in our cats and dogs as well.
Yes.
And so food intake exceeds requirements, whereas normally in nature, feeding will stop once that certain requirement level has been reached, because it's not an animal's advantage, whether it's a hunting or being hunted, to be overweight.
No.
And so we've got all these feeds which have had molasses put in it because it's cheap to add, but it doubles the sales because the horses are eating double the amounts they should be eating. And so it's all been driven by money and profit, unfortunately. And the vast majority of horses aren't doing the level of work that they really need these feeds at all. So
exactly.
Sort of the basic physiology of a horse, for those who don't know, is they are hind gut fermenters. So we've got the ruminants that where, like cows and sheep, where they've got a big stomach at the front end, and that fills up, and the bacteria and everything ferments the food in the rumen. But horses are different. They've got a huge colon, and it's absolutely huge if you've never seen it. And obviously that's where the fiber comes through, and that's where it ferments, and the bacteria there release the nutrients. So we need that fiber getting through there. So horses are primarily high fiber fermenters, and yet the vast majority of feed which people are feeding their horses these days is a simple stomach feed, which the relative volumes of the stomach to the colon tells us which bit should be full and which bit shouldn't.
Exactly.
So this is where we need to sort of get back to basics and understanding anatomy, because that's really what drives the diet. And I remember before I used to get it wrong. I used to say that the digestion evolved to eat the food that they're supposed to be eating, and actually that's wrong. They evolved eating the food. It's a subtle but important difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So horses evolved eating grass and having a mouthful here, and then running away a bit, eating about a bit over there. And especially our native ponies, they really are on sparse sparse ground, so
Forage.
that
Yeah.
they'd have to look for mouthfuls between. So
Mm.
this is where we need to start feeding fibre to the
Yeah.
hind gut. And it's it was great to come across what you're doing, Sandra.
Yeah. Can
It,
I?
it's fulfilling that. And so and as a complete feed as well. So
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Can I explain why some of your viewers might not know that the tradition of feeding grain type based feeds and sugar and starch feeds, it comes from the tradition of farmers when horses used to plough fields, 5 acre fields on a Monday, had to get up in the morning on a Tuesday, do another 5 acres, and they had to find a way of replacing that fuel in the horse's muscles, the glycogen in the muscles. So the quickest way to replace the glycogen in the muscles overnight was to feed oats,
Yeah,
because they were so high on the glycemic index. And so oats was like a staple diet for farmers to feed horses. So oats and barley in the winter, that made them fat and kept the weight on them. So these grains were used primarily for horses that were working, and they were working quite hard. And our horses nowadays, even our top horses that work what we think is hard, is they're not working as hard as they used to work when they used to be vehicles and doing the mail run and ploughing fields. So we've got to realize that we're putting this grain, this non-structural carbohydrates, the sugars into these animals that are not doing the work that they need there's no need for that amount of glycogen to be stored in the horse's muscles, and that we then start getting issues of metabolic issues in our horses. And that's where we are today. We've got an epidemic of
yeah,
metabolic issues such as EMS, equine metabolic syndrome, which relates to and progresses to things like laminitis, which is massive now. It never used to be as
no,
prevalent as it is now, but everyone knows someone that's got a pony or a horse that is laminitic, and it is the most excruciating pain that you can inflict on an animal.
yeah.
Laminitis, I'm not going to go into it, but yeah, it's massively epidemic at the moment, equine metabolic syndrome, similar to the massive epidemic we've got in type 2 diabetes in humans.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar, isn't it? I mean, I remember, I mean, so that's that EMS is something that's only really come on in the last 10 years or so. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even remember it back in the sort of early noughties. If someone was, I don't think it was even probably named back then.
No.
So it's something that's really sort of developed. And even as you say, feeding when they were feeding grains for the male horse and for the working horses in the fields and everything, even though they was feeding oats, they were being soaked overnight as well. So
Yes.
they were a very different feed from the type of
Yes.
grain we're getting in the hard feeds that
Yes.
all the feed companies are
Yeah.
pushing. And of course, it's the same with human nutrition, where it's being led by the industry
Hmm.
itself, and they're paying the advertising in the magazines.
Yeah.
So that's driving it. And the magazine people want to make money. They want to sell magazines, so they sell advertising. The food
Mm.
companies want to sell foods, and they want to sell lots of it, so they put molasses in it, and then they
Yeah.
write articles to influence it.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult spiral
It's a
to
vicious
get out
circle.
of,
It
because the
is.
whole
Yeah.
industry now has been set up to provide the wrong information in
Yeah.
nutrition. It's not unique to horses. It happens in the pet food industry as well, and it happens in the human
Can I
nutrition
just, on
side
that
as well.
point though, Roger, can I say about the highly processed seed oils as well?
Yeah,
Now there are some seed oils that are really good, and like linseed oils, a really good omega-3 oil, and what we use in EquidGel is a really good omega-3 oil. But the highly processed oils, like your rapeseed oil, like your soya oil, all these oils are highly processed. These do the same issue. They've got the same issues with horses as they have with humans. Highly processed vegetable oils are omega-6 based, which means they are highly pro-inflammatory. So if you've got an injury in an animal or yourself or humans, and we have pro-inflammatory oils, it's only going to exacerbate these injuries, because it doesn't allow for healing, because it's vasoconstricting. It stops the blood flow. flow going around the body. And so, Mother Nature only actually provides omega-3 oil for herbivores, and that is in forage. You don't get very little omega-6, and that's only in the seed tips of grasses that we get the non-structural carbohydrates that contain the omega-6. So the ratio is very skewed towards omega-3 and not omega-6. So when you put all these feeds into your horse that's high grain, that's got all these oils added to it, rapeseed oil, have a look at your label.
Yeah.
Rapeseed oil, soya oil, you're skewing that ratio towards omega-6, and that's why your horse is not healing as quick as you'd like it to heal, etc. So it has a real impact on the digestive system, what we put in.
I mean, I think I'd go further than that to honestly to say that as you say, the forage has got high levels of omega-3 and very little omega-6, and seed oils even aren't really wouldn't be part of an ancestral diet anyway, because they wouldn't be, they'd be getting a little bit of oil if they eat a little bit of grass seeds or seeds for certain times of the year, but they wouldn't be getting it on a daily basis.
Not if it was highly processed, Roger. If it's ordinary, it doesn't need any processing, then it's okay for them. Yeah,
but I think the reason why they put such high levels of these seed oils in is because they're trying to get the omega-3 level up, and they only look at what they think is the benefit from the omega-3. They forget about the harm done by the omega-6. And the reason why they're putting in such high levels of omega-3 is because the grains and the other ingredients are causing inflammation that require the omega-3, and so it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle again. When you're doing like what you're saying, when you're feeding the EquidGel and you've got the alfalfa in there in that suspension, then actually the dietary requirement for the omega-3 will be significantly less, because they're then getting sufficient omega-3 in the grass, in their forage, in their hay, and actually they don't need a lot of extra omega-3 because they actually haven't got the inflammatory part of the diet that's using it up.
But our feed has got an omega-3 oil in it, but it's non-processed. It has no processing whatsoever, and so that's why it works, because it just tops up all the omega-3 that we're getting from the forage and from they're getting from their daily ration. Totally.
I mean, it sounds a really good idea, and obviously the whole, as you say, you can lead a horse to water but you can't make it drink is very true, and part of that obviously is horses they can sniff the water, they can tell whether it's good water or bad water too. And actually the old sort of frontier guys, they were if they got to a stream, if their horse drank, they drank, and if the horse didn't, they didn't drink. So horses are very picky on water as well, and consequently with so much water that's coming through now from taps is
contaminated,
and it's got a lot of chlorine and unfortunately fluoride and things potentially coming down the track which aren't necessary to. And so horses will drink what they have to, because they're never going to not drink, but they're certainly not as hydrated as they should be in many cases. And if you provide a really good quality water, I would imagine even horses that owners think aren't dehydrated would probably drink a bucket load, just because it's good water put in front of them. So having that within the feed as well, I'm sure.
I mean, it is difficult because most horses will drink their normal amount of water at home if they're not doing any work. It's over and above maintenance is where you've got to make sure that they have the right amount of fluid level in their body, obviously to be able to produce the saliva they need to digest the fibrous material that they eat. They have to have enough fluid in their body fluids to actually produce that saliva. And this is where impaction colic comes along, because if your horse hasn't had enough to drink for whatever reason, it could be palatability, it could be anything, that if he hasn't had enough to drink, and then say for instance you put him on a lorry, you take him 4 or 5 hours down the road, he still hasn't had enough to drink, you give him a hay net, he eats the hay net, he'll either get choke or he'll get impaction colic, because they haven't got the saliva there to be able to do it. So the best way of doing it is making sure that they drink before you take them out anywhere before. And that's a good thing about what I designed and discovered, was the fact that this can be fed before you do anything, before you take your car to London, you fill it up with fuel. You don't drive it 3/4 of the way there on fumes and expect the carburetor to be still working well.
Yeah.
You've got to put the fuel in before. Mother Nature didn't design grain to be put in as fuel, like you were saying earlier. She designed fibre to be put in as fuel because that does not get digested in the stomach.
Sure.
That goes through to the hindgut. So the horse can still operate, it can still run, it can still do everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But
Absolutely.
if you feed a grain feed, you can't do that because that grain feed, the moment it hits the cecum, will cause a dietary induced colic. So that's why you cannot do exercise after you've given a feed, or travel a horse after you've given a feed. You've got to leave it at least 2 hours to let that food go through and be digested before it gets to the cecum. So this is why what we do is Mother Nature in a bucket, because you can do it before you do anything, and it stays and it will hold in the stomach and then go through to the hindgut and then be held in the hindgut until it's used.
Yeah, I mean, it's this whole idea, isn't it, that horse you can't horses won't run or do anything when they've got food in their stomach. So, well, actually, I don't remember any horses when they were grazing in the wild and they were suddenly hurt. Some pack of wolves came out and they
Yeah.
said, "Hang on, Mr. Wolf, hang on,
Wait too much.
wait till not. I've just finished my dinner, but you've got to let it go down and digest first before you chase me."
Exactly. And
they had
funny,
to run away straight away and not tie up and not have problems as a result of doing it. And
exactly.
so,
And the good thing about that as well, let you know about the racing industry. Race horses are doing the most natural thing that they can do, and that's running away in a straight line at speed. Now, if they've got a gut full of fibre and water, it goes towards the locomotive effect, like that in the gut, and it actually allows them to run faster when they've got this locomotion effect going on with the gut swinging backwards and forwards as they gallop. So it's a good thing if they've got a gut full of fibre. It's good for them.
there's a song there somewhere, isn't it, where just the swing of the food in the gut gave the horse just the nose to get in front and win the race, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, but we're banished from that at the moment. We're not allowed to go near that at the moment.
Well,
yeah, which is the shame.
I'm sure it'll come around at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But obviously we've talked about equine metabolic syndrome. Are there any other areas? Obviously nutrition is foundational to the whole health of the horse, and everything. So what else, are there any other conditions? Obviously you've been doing this a little while now, it's not a new launch. So have you had any other feedback from other areas where people have come to you, said, "Oh, I've been really struggling on hard feed normally, and then I've gone over to the EquidGel and this," they've seen some benefits perhaps that they weren't even expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I've had quite a few. I've had allergic reactions. We've had a whole yard of horses that were come up in a massive allergic reactions all around the skin. The skin was just prickly, and they couldn't put girths on because it'd rub off and make girth galls. So they couldn't ride the horses, and it was because they were having an allergic reaction to a particular feed. And we went on, and they used they used the EquidGel, and within 2 weeks this had disappeared completely. And I'm not saying it was that caused it, but all I'm saying is it worked, and they were able to ride their horses after 2 weeks. So another one is dental. In dental when they have diastema, or they had teeth extractions. With a couple of dental centres have used it using the EquidGel for that reason, because horses can drink it and it doesn't stick in the teeth. It doesn't cause diastema. We're looking at esophageal blockages. If we've got a horse, I mean, there was a horse the other day that had got kicked in the throat and had an injury in his esophagus, and it couldn't swallow. But because it's a liquid feed, it can be put through a nasal gastric tube. So it's the only feed that it can be used for a nasal gastric tube.
Sure.
We've also used it quite extensively with horses with grass sickness, for instance, because grass sickness that paralyze the toxins, paralyze the swallowing. peristalsis, movement in the esophagus and the small intestine. So if you can get it in and tube it in, the cecum is still working, the bacteria is still working. So if you can feed the bacteria, it's helped horses with equine
Grass sickness,
grass
yeah.
sickness. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
I had one of my best results with a horse that had grass sickness, and it was they weren't expected to live, as they usually don't, and we got a good result with it.
yeah.
And actually ended up being sort of a bit of a mascot for the Grass Sickness Society. So
Yeah.
it's as you say, but if you can keep the nutrition side of things
If you can
going,
keep
then
nutrition
it
aside.
gives the other sorts of treatments that I do, the chance to work. And
Work.
can't promise that
Yeah,
it's going to work on everyone, but where there's life, there's hope. And if you
exactly.
keep the nutrition going and allow the gut to function without those refluxes, and without sort of getting constipated and all the rest of
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
then you've got a chance of sorting out the sort of issues in other directions. So
The biggest one though is gastric ulcer syndrome. That is the biggest one because that is
yeah,
the most claimed for on insurance condition on insurance
yeah,
because of the high levels of starch and sugar in the diet, and because of management conditions, so horses being kept in stables, and sometimes you don't have an option, but horses need to be kept in, and so because of management conditions, stress, and high sugar and starch, gastric ulcers are at the all-time high. It's absolutely epidemic.
yeah,
Now with what we do with EquidGel, because it is a fibre-based feed, it actually forms a fibre mat in the stomach. It reduces acid splash in the stomach,
yeah.
and it increases pH. So we're getting a more alkaline type environment in the stomach rather than acid, because we don't need acid to break down fibre.
No,
We don't need hydrochloric acid production to break fibre down, but we need it to break down starch. So it reduces the amount of hydrochloric acid, forms a fibre mat, and obviously it goes through to the hind gut with the hydration. And so we have really, really, really good results and a real impact on equine gastric ulcer syndrome.
yeah, excellent. I mean, it sounds that obviously, as you say, it solves a number of problems in lots of different goes. I mean, having gone on to the carnivore diet myself and sort of understanding what plants can do to disrupt digestion and everything as well. What we do eat is important, but it's also equally important what we're not eating. So there's two benefits with what you're doing. One is obviously what you're feeding is fibre, good quality fibre to the hind gut with the
Yeah.
water to do so that works well. But also by replacing the grains, then you're getting a double whammy, because
Yeah.
what people don't realize is grains, because they are the seed of a plant, that is where the plants put a lot of their anti-nutrients and a lot of their toxins, because they're trying to make sure that their seeds get into the ground, stay there, germinate, and grow the next generation of plants. And so all these grains that are going into these feeds, that yes, that there's carbohydrates in there, but there's lots of other anti-nutrients in there as
Lectins
well,
are
which
terrible. Yeah.
just digestion disruptors and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. And there's another bit sort of extrapolating across from work that's been done in pet cats, actually, by a chap called Pottinger in the 1930s. And what he found was he was doing some experiments with cats and feeding them a raw diet, and he found that if he gave them an unnatural feed, like a kibble feed, then it took 3 generations of correct feeding to undo the harm that was done by the one generation of poor feeding. So there are obviously epigenetic effects as a result of nutrition as well. And what I'm wondering is whether what we're seeing in our horses now isn't just as a result of what the individual that's having the problems is manifesting, but potentially even manifesting some of the issues that their parents or grandparents were set up through their epigenetics, through the through the generations to to manifest it further on down the line.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
how we feed our animals and ourselves now isn't just important for the individual that's actually having that feed, it's actually
no,
important for the future generations as well. And I think that's a message which is often forgotten and overlooked. And that whole wider aspect of it is
yeah,
really important, because it just because you're feeding right, you can do the best that you can, but the past can sometimes come back and bite you a little bit as well. So that's what we've really got to optimize. And I always say to say to my pet dogs and cat owners, when I'm pushing to do the raw diet with no zero plant ingredient in it, I'm aiming for the gold standard.
yeah,
Because if we aim for the gold standard, we've got a chance of getting there. If we only aim for a halfway house and fall short,
yeah,
we're not going to get to where we want to be. So, I think what you're feeding fits into that scenario. It's
yeah,
like,
definitely,
go for
definitely.
the gold standard, get rid of the grains, feed the hind gut with everything that it needs, then you've got a far better
Mm,
chance of an
mm,
overall healthy situation, and
yeah,
probably changes that you may not even expect. Obviously, we
generations.
know the microbiome is important for immunity and for mental health in people. I don't see
Mm,
why that should be any different for animals as well,
no,
quite
it's not.
frankly.
No.
And if you're feeding the gut right, then you've got a better chance of having better immunity and better behavior
Yeah,
and everything else.
can I just say that I bred the world's first EquidGel stallion? Okay,
Okay.
I bred him. His mother, I've still got his mum. His mother had EquidGel just as she was in her third trimester,
Yeah.
and so he came out and he started having her EquidGel about 6 weeks after he was born. So he was just nibbling on it, licking it, and then after nearly 2 months, he was on his own. He was taking his own in because it's a liquid, so he was drinking it. Now he was weaned at 4 months old, and he looked amazing. He had a really good structure that you would think that he had a grain feed pumped into him, but he didn't. He never had a grain past his lips. Now this boy now is 12 years old. He had had no pain his whole life, and he goes totally against what you would think a 12-year-old stallion would be like. You
Sure.
can stand him with mares. He travels with mares. In fact, the mares play up worse than he does, to be fair. Yeah, but to see him, you would not think that he was a stallion. They get a bad rap because they are fed grain and they've been fed this way for years, and they have this mentality that they're off their heads. Well, they probably are, because they've got so much pain. I've got the proof in the pudding, Roger. He's in
Yeah.
my field. He's 12 years old, and he has all my novices ride him.
Yeah, I think a lot's to be said. Obviously, for the pregnancy side of things. I mean, so many foals are born with limb deformities and
Yeah,
problems that and it's because of poor feeding.
feeding.
They're feeding the mare too much because they want a good foal, but actually
Yeah,
they've overdone her, and she maybe has a difficult foaling as well, but
yeah,
also developmental problems as well because the milk isn't quite right
no,
either. So, I think the nutrition is so much more than just what goes in and comes out. There's such major ramifications to all other
yeah,
aspects of health. And
yeah,
I think a lot of foaling problems and a lot of developmental problems would be sorted if they were being fed the right feed and ditch the grains
absolutely. Yeah,
from right, even from before they're born.
yeah, exactly. Well, this is what I'm saying. He
Through
was
their
on it.
mum.
Yeah, he was on it. She was on it for the last 3 months. Well, she wasn't on anything until the last 3 months, and then she was on EquidGel. And then he was born, he was on it. Then he was weaned onto it. So he wasn't shocked by being taken away from the milk bar. He was
Yeah.
still getting the hydration because he was getting his bucket of EquidGel every morning, every night. And he was growing really, really well. He never suffered any digestive issues. So he has no reason to behave in a way that
No.
shows that he's upset with anything. So maybe we need to start looking at, like you say, the way we're feeding these mares. Plus, at the end of the day, if a mare is in its last trimester and the foal is pressing up against its digestive system,
Yeah.
feeding a liquid feed at that point, you can't impact on a liquid. Yeah,
Yeah.
it cannot happen. So you're going to help your mare. There's a lot of mares that are lost, just before the foal is born because of colic,
Colics. Yeah.
impacting colic, and so this is a perfect way to ensure that your mare that is in its last trimester and it's literally about to foal, that it's not going to suffer from an impaction if you're feeding a liquid feed.
No, because I mean, prevention's always better than cure,
Yeah,
isn't it, at the end of the day?
absolutely.
So of course, the one big thing I can imagine people are looking at going, okay, it sounds all really good. It must be really expensive. It
No.
must be more. How does it compare to, in terms of cost? Obviously, especially as
Well,
feed and things are going up in price, and grains are going to go
yeah,
up in price a lot more
it
with
is.
what's been going on as well. So, an alternative to grain that is, I would imagine, going to be a lot more stable price than what we're going to see with the grains in the near
Yeah.
to distant future.
It's going up massively, and the thing is, as well, we're trying. I went to a horse show, not horse show, an event. I can't remember the National Equine Show, I think it was,
Yeah.
and I walked around there, and I saw so many companies that are just selling sweet treats and things and additives and supplements. So
And
you can
licks
end
and
up
things. I mean, just base
purely
pure molasses. I mean, they're off their
molasses,
heads.
yeah,
I mean,
molasses. Oh, it's terrible. It was absolutely terrible. So you can end up spending a fortune on horses if you want to, if you want to feed all that stuff.
yeah,
But really, truly, my with what I do, for a typical 500 kilogram horse,
yeah.
one sack of EquidGel, it's 10 kilos, makes 100 kilos of food.
Wow.
So one bag will last a 500 kilogram horse about a month.
Okay.
Yeah, so it costs about £1, £1.20, £1.30 a day to
Okay.
feed. If you can't afford to feed your horse £1.30 a day, you really need to see if you want to buy a rabbit instead, because horses can be expensive.
Well, absolutely, and it's not just the cost of the feed, is it? Of course,
No,
obviously as well. If you insist on feeding all these licks
yeah,
and molasses and end up with an ill horse, your vet bill is going
your
to be
vet bill.
huge.
Yeah,
So that's a cost that isn't directly thought of in terms of feed, but a lot of it will be coming from feed when it's metabolically related, or
yeah,
so laminitis, EMS,
yeah,
MMS, all those sort of conditions. I'm doing my and laminitis, of course. I'm doing myself out of work,
yeah. It's management. It's
which
the
is what we should be
management.
doing. But
It,
but these are all costs which
yeah.
which are important. So if we get the feed right, then
I
everything
don't
else
see
just
a
tends to
vet.
fall into place.
We don't see vets. My horses, they only see the vet to have their, because they compete. They only see the vet to have their jabs, for competing.
Yeah,
But they don't see digestive issues. We don't have anything like that. My horses also have been, this last year, I did an experiment. This last year, they've all been barefoot. And
right.
they've got the most amazing feet. I haven't had a
Good.
farrier for a year, yeah, and literally their feet are absolutely phenomenal, and that is because they are well hydrated from the inside out. They
Yeah,
don't need to have cracked hooves because they've got plenty of hydration inside them. So
sure.
there are lots of things that you will save money on, not only your feed bills, because obviously you don't need all the supplements and the carrots
No.
and treats and the calmers. Once you've given it all that, you have to give them calmers to get them down off the roof that they're on, because of all the sugar, you know.
What people don't realise, Sandra, is that they're addicted. They
Yes,
are addicts. This
addicted.
behaviour of kicking doors and all the rest at a
Hmm.
certain time of the day, on one level it's vaguely amusing, but actually, if you look at it and stand back and be really objective about it, it's an addict behaviour,
It's addict
and we
behavior.
and we and we're feeding an addict.
Yes.
And it's we certainly know that carbohydrates hit the same part of the brain as meth,
Mm.
crystal meth does. So, when people then wonder why they're, maybe the horses are a little bit angsty and a bit temperamental and potentially dangerous at times around feeding time. Well, it's
Yeah.
because you've got an addict there, and
Yeah,
it will take time for that addict's behavior
it
to
does.
stop. It can take
Yeah.
up to 6 months
And
or
that's the
more.
other thing. That's the other reason why I have to talk to the owners, because you give your horse this feed. It's like having tea that you used to have three sugars in, having no sugar in.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's still the same tea, but it just tastes like rubbish
yeah,
because you're used to having that sugar. So it does take horses some time to get used to. It's like a withdrawal symptom, like you were saying about an addict.
yeah,
It's like withdrawing it. But in Mother Nature, in nature, there's very few things that a horse will have that
yeah.
is as sweet as what they get every day, twice a
No.
day.
And then they
You know,
certainly won't get it in that volume. Obviously,
no,
at certain times of the year when fruit is ripe, I dare say
yeah,
they'll get a
the odd
little bit of sugar
apple,
hit from that, but it's nothing
blackberries.
compared to the amount of molasses that's being included in these feeds. So it's yeah, it's got to be a better way forward,
It
hasn't it?
has to be. We have to
We've
start
got to
looking at it.
think of all the benefits,
Yeah,
and it's gonna take time. Well, we've sort of used up our hour, which is
really, already.
already,
Oh my
which
gosh.
is, but it's really good. We've had a really good. We can always talk again at another time, but I think it's
Yeah,
a really good grounding to get people to think about. Those who've got horses, what are we feeding? Why are we feeding it? Because
yeah.
obviously, although we're talking this as a feed replacement, we're not getting rid of hay or grass or anything.
No, 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 no.
Those are
We
still
still have to
happening
have
as
our
well. So,
forage. Yeah,
um, you know, this is just another way of feeding your horses that's actually feeding the area of the gut where it's supposed to be fed, and that
yeah,
they evolved filling it.
yeah.
So we're actually taking them back to an ancestral way of eating, and when we do that, they will be that much more healthy, because
Yeah.
we've now got to a point where horses just aren't lasting.
No,
It's and yet their natural lifespan should be sort of 20, 30
30
years.
years. Yeah, yeah.
um
Can I just say though, Roger,
hmm,
that the fact is, if you've got a horse that has to be presented to the vets for a metabolic disease, a disorder, or anything like that, they can be presented once under the insurance. The next time that you present that horse, you have to pay for it yourself.
yeah,
So you really do need to start looking at ways of not presenting any issues to a vet, because if you feed a natural diet, there's very unlikely that you'll be there having to, speak to the vet about issues for digestion.
yeah. And it's not just about the one horse on your insurance policy as well. I know of people who've they've had a horse, and something's gone wrong with it, and unfortunately the horse has had to be put to sleep or something, and then they've got another horse, and then the same thing happens,
Happens.
and they get in this cycle where they're buying horses,
Yep.
and then doing the same thing, and it's like the Einstein's definition of madness is to do the same thing and
Something
expect a different
over. Yeah.
result. And
Yeah.
that can be in terms of training practices, in terms of
Yeah.
musculoskeletal wear and tear, but it can also be in terms of feeding as well.
Feeding.
So, it's not just within the one horse that you're going to end
No.
up with metabolic problems. It's going, if you keep feeding horses, sort of in future horses down the track, that you feed in the same way that had a metabolic problem in the
Yeah.
past, don't be surprised if you end up with another metabolic problem. That is
Exactly.
the definition of madness, to
Yeah.
expect it not to happen.
And that's why I do my equine nutrition hydrotherapy assessments and courses. We're now doing courses now called Understanding the Way of the Horse, where we actually work with the rider and we help them with mindset, and I work with the horses and the owners to make sure that they understand the education behind nutrition, so that they can take that forward to their new horses or their child's horse or pony,
Yeah.
and it gives them the education. Because I think one thing that's lacking massively in the equine industry at the moment is education. Anyone can go and buy a horse, anyone can put it on a livery yard, and you listen to your next door neighbour, oh, my horse has
Oh,
this.
they're all experts.
Yeah, they're all experts at it. Even the yard owner is an expert, but they might not even have a horse themselves, but they're an expert. So really, there's a lot of nutritionists out there. People say, I'm an equine nutrition hydrotherapist. I'm the world's expert on nutritional hydrotherapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have got this it goes all over the world. It goes to vets in 25 countries now. Yeah,
Awesome.
that we have our in clinical nutrition. So, you know, if anybody wants to learn about this, they can visit my website.
Yeah,
Um,
and we will put all Sandra's details,
yeah,
contact details, and whatever she wants to learn how to do what she's doing, and
yeah.
all the rest of it. We'll put those in the in the notes below the video as well, so that everybody can you know, not just hear it now, but obviously get in contact and do something about it, because you
And
know
we're
this
doing
is
practical
action.
workshops as well, Roger. We're doing practical workshops where people can come along and they can actually learn hands-on and get so much information and so much education on what you know, how to go forward
Yeah.
and, you know, feed horses species specifically and get the health out of them. Yeah.
Marvelous, marvelous. Well, it's been absolutely great talking to you, Sandra,
Thank
and it's
you.
been really enjoyable. And I hope everybody, I'm sure everybody has been watching it will find it equally stimulating, whether they've got horses or not. Then, you know, but hopefully those who have got horses will actually make them sit up and think and go, oh, as you say, I know so and so's got a horse that's got this problem. I wonder if it could help them, or
Mm.
I wonder if that. I wonder if my horse, you know, if let's get it sorted now before it goes there as well. So, you know, actions speak louder than words. So we've done the words bit. It's up to everybody else to do the action now. So,
Thank you, Roger.
absolutely brilliant. And as I say, we'll put all the contact details, everything, in the notes below, and yeah, we'll see how we go from there. Brilliant,
Thank you.
lovely.